At 2:18 a.m., every single device in the city screamed at once. Phones, televisions, car dashboards, hospital monitors. It was an emergency alert, the kind that jolts you awake, heart pounding. But this one was different. It didn't tell you what to do. It didn't warn of a storm or an attack. It said, "Do not process this message." And then, it just stayed there, burned onto the screen. The alert itself was strange. It wasn't just text. The symbols kept shifting, flickering, like they couldn't decide what shape to take. Letters folded into impossible angles. Words broke apart mid-sentence, rearranging themselves into new, unrecognizable forms. Underneath this chaotic display, one line of text repeated over and over. "This is not for you." Panic started to ripple through the city. People's phones began to crack, the glass spider webbing without being touched. Some devices overheated, becoming painfully hot. Then, a second line appeared below the first. "Understanding is a form of entry." It felt less like a warning and more like a statement of fact. What was trying to get in? And where? Within minutes, the emergency call centers were completely flooded. 911 was a wall of screams. People crying that their heads were splitting open, that the message on their screens was still changing, twisting into shapes that hurt to look at. At 2:26 a.m., the first body was reported. A man found in his apartment, eyes wide open, jaw dislocated as if from an inhuman scream. Every bone in his neck was twisted backward, a gruesome, unnatural angle. The phone beside his body was still glowing, still displaying the alert. But now, the symbols on a screen had stopped moving. They were static, fixed. It was as if they were finished with that person. The authorities were powerless. They tried to override the signal, to shut down the broadcast. They failed. The alert seemed to be everywhere and nowhere at once. It ignored their commands. It ignored airplane mode. It even ignored power cuts, remaining on screens long after the batteries should have died. A terrifying pattern began to emerge. The people who tried to consciously read it, to decipher the shifting symbols, died first. Those who took screenshots, trying to capture the anomaly, died even faster, their deaths more violent. But the ones who tried to translate it, they didn't die immediately. They started changing. At 2:41 a.m., a new line of text appeared. On every screen, underneath the swirling chaos. "Looking is optional." And then another. "Comprehension is fatal." A wave of new terror washed over the survivors. People started covering their phones, throwing blankets over their TVs, smashing their smart devices with hammers. But it was useless. Reflections betrayed them. The message appeared in mirrors, in the dark, blank screens of broken electronics, in the glass of darkened windows. Some people began bleeding from the nose, a slow, steady trickle of crimson. Others started whispering, repeating strange, guttural sounds that didn't belong to any known human language. Then, the alert did something new. It began to respond. If someone stared at it for too long, the symbols on their screen would slow down. They would adjust their movements, simplify their forms, almost as if they were learning. Survivors who managed to look away in time reported hearing a voice, not through speakers, not through headphones, but directly inside their skull. It wasn't speaking words. It was aligning, a humming, a vibration, a frequency that felt like it was tuning itself to the very rhythm of human thought. It started with a leak, a single, scrambled transmission that flashed across screens for less than a second before it was scrubbed from the internet. But it wasn't fast enough. Someone caught it. Someone recorded it. From a heavily classified channel, a voice, distorted and panicked, uttered a single sentence. "This alert is not a warning. It is a confirmation." Then, another voice, even more strained, broke through the static. "They already found us." A pause, filled with the sound of what could only be described as shattering glass. "The alert is for them, not for us." And then, silence. Immediately after, the city plunged into a total blackout. No lights, no power, no internet. But the alert. The alert state. It was burned into every screen it had touched. Laptops, phones, televisions, even digital billboards that had lost power. A ghost image, an afterglow of the terrifying message. For those who stared at it too long, it burned into their eyes. Too, a retinal phantom that wouldn't go away, replaying the words in their minds from 9:30 p.m. to 11 p.m. A strange understanding began to ripple through the city. The people who survived the initial event, the ones who hadn't succumbed to the immediate panic, they stopped talking about what they saw. When asked, they would refuse to describe the message. At first, we thought it was fear, trauma, but it wasn't. It was shame. A deep, collective shame that settled over them like a shroud. They were ashamed because they had finally realized the horrifying truth. The message wasn't hostile. It wasn't a threat or an attack. It was a set of instructions, and humanity was never the intended recipient. We weren't meant to see it, let alone execute its commands. The few who managed to decipher even a fragment of its meaning, they changed. They didn't die. They weren't exactly alive either. They just became open, like a door left ajar. Their minds became conduits for something else. Their bodies were still there, breathing, blinking, but the person inside was gone. They were just empty vessels, waiting. Then, at 2:59 a.m., one final transmission appeared. This time, it was different. No static, no distortion. The text was crystal clear, appearing on every dark screen in the city simultaneously. It read, "Human cognition confirmed. Access granted." And that's when it happened. All across the city, people began to collapse. Not in pain. They weren't screaming or crying. They were smiling. A serene, unnerving smile of pure relief. As if the burden of being human was finally lifted from their shoulders. As their bodies fell, the ghostly alert finally faded from the screens, leaving only darkness. But something else stayed behind. You could feel it in the air. Apresent. Tis morning. The emergency alert system is back online. Everything appears normal. The familiar, jarring sound. The same system protocols. But the experts, the ones who are left, they're saying something is fundamentally wrong. The signal's origin has changed. Before, it came from external transmitters, from satellites, from government towers. Now, it's coming from inside the network. Inside our devices. Inside. Miss it. So, tonight, and every night after, if your phone buzzes with an alert for no reason, if a message appears that you weren't expecting, do not read it. Turn away. Because this time, it might not be a test of the system. It might be a test for you. It might be checking to see if you're finally ready to understand. The alert was never meant to save humans. It was meant to find the ones who could be used.